Shabbat Shalom, my friends, and welcome back to our ongoing conversations with the weekly Torah portion. Our Sedra this week is Shmini, beginning with Leviticus 9, verse 1 and following. Before we begin wrestling with what is, in fact, an enormously difficult text, let me also mention that this Shabbat has been assigned an additional reading, one dealing with the red heifer, the Parah Adumah. And because of that reading, this Shabbat is referred to as Shabbat Parah, one of the special lead-up Sabbaths before we encounter First Sedra on Friday evening, April 15th. Yep, it's time to prepare invitation lists, menus, shopping lists, and the Haggadah of our choice. In this terrible period scarred by the sudden, brutal creation of millions of refugees, might I also express the hope that you will be inviting to your festival table someone who is alone, perhaps someone new to your community. It would be a good thing to do. It always is, this year more so. The name of our Sedra Shmini refers to the 8th and final day of the ordination ceremony for Aaron and his sons into the priesthood. What a glorious period it was. Special sacrifices were prepared and brought to the altar by Aaronite priests wearing magnificent garments. Then Aaron lifts up his hands and blesses the people. In a rare gesture, Moses and Aaron then together enter the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. When they emerge, they together bless the people. Another rare circumstance. And then fire came forth from God to consume their offerings. Vayar kol ha'am vayaronu vayiplu al panehem. And all the people saw and shouted for joy and fell on their faces. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs did the calculations for us. It took 5 Sedras to fully describe the instructions for building the sanctuary. It took 2 Sedras to describe in detail the sacrificial offerings that were to be brought. It took 7 days for the ritual of ordaining Aaron and his sons to be completed. Now we have reached Yom HaShmini, the 8th day, and disaster. You know the story. 2 of Aaron's sons, his eldest, Nadav and Avihu, both newly ordained priests, brought an unauthorized offering before God. Once again, fire descended from the heavens, but this time the 2 priests themselves were consumed by the fire, and they perished. There is a pragmatic rule in biblical interpretation. The more explanations that medieval and modern commentators offer for a situation or a text, the clearer it is that they don't really understand what is going on there. Oh, they offer proposals. They weren't wearing the proper clothing. They took the fire from the wrong place. They didn't check with Dad and their Uncle Moses for approval. They were acting arrogantly, and then there is a strangely familiar suggestion, not mainstream, but interesting. They should have been married by then, and they weren't. It seems that in somebody's mind, an unmarried Jewish adult is deeply suspect, and I won't go there. Interestingly, Sachs then inserted himself into the centuries-old search for an explanation. For Sachs, quote, "The most fundamental mistake in what Nadav and Avihu did was to take the powers that belong to human encounters with the world and apply them to our encounters with the divine." I'm not going to repeat that because I have trouble understanding it myself. But Sachs goes on to celebrate God as an exemplar of love and of justice, not at all an angry, cruel, harsh, and capricious being. Sachs insists that the Tanakh, taken as a whole, is a passionate story of God's love for us, despite the many ways in which we just did not prove ourselves worthy of such a love. I've had 2 occasions recently to spend some precious and wonderful and illuminating time with Jesper Svartvik, an ordained Lutheran minister born in Sweden, possessing a Master of Theology and a PhD, a fluent Hebrew speaker who frequently spends time in Israel, and one of those in the vanguard of Christian scholars who celebrate both their love for and respect for Judaism. Svartvik is a beautiful human being, a deeply religious, superb scholar, in my language, a mensch. I have learned much from our conversations, and even more from reading his thoughts. In his book, Reconciliation and Transformation, Svartvik introduced me to the term preunderstanding. In the world of hermeneutics, in a world within which the process of interpretation is itself the focus of study, Svartvik asserts that we come to the process of interpretation pre-packaged. By that he means that we already exist in what he calls an interpretational framework that greatly influences us as we struggle to interpret a text or an event. No one approaches the process of biblical interpretation without the baggage of our own interpretational framework, a framework that Svartvik terms pre-understanding. The story of Nadav and Avihu was deeply troubling to so many of us. If we would read it cold without pre-understandings, we would see precisely what Lord Sachs tells us we must not see. In that world, there is no problem. It's a given that God is a God of love. It is a given that God is just. It is a given that God is forgiving. It is a given that God is neither harsh nor capricious. So everything that might lead us to other conclusions needs to be reinterpreted by us using different hermeneutics. Why? Because of the pre-understandings we bring to a sacred text. I'm going to stop here, break, go into the second taping. Stick with me.